Let's speak now to defence analyst Colonel Simon Diggins. Simon, good afternoon to you. It's early days. It's hour one of day one, but this is what we'd hoped would happen. It has happened. Should we remain optimistic?
I think we should stay very cautious. The way in which the hostage deal has been set up is a whole series of preconditions, not just to get to where we are now, but also to maintain the momentum over, firstly, over the 4 days, with the planned release we know, but also then the option and the opportunity to keep that humanitarian pause going on a basis of 10 hostages being released over the succeeding 10 days. And that obviously, in terms of getting women and children back to their families, has got to be the right thing to try and do. But it's difficult, and there are lots of people who are involved in this, not just the Hamas and Israelis, but also there are groups like Palestinian Jihad, who also we understand are holding some hostages, and they may not be so susceptible as a kind of conversation through the Qataris as Hamas have been.
Which brings us back into the most fundamental point, Simon, and that is that we are dealing with a terrorist organisation here. That is not the work of a moment to try and cut a deal with these people.
No, they are a terrorist organisation, and what they did on October the 7th was just absolutely shameful, and everything goes with that. Nonetheless, there is an issue around how do we look after those who are innocent in all this, and that's got to include the Palestinian civilians. 1 million of them have been moved out of northern Gaza. Many of them have been killed. Forgive me, I'm not going to get into an argument about casualty numbers. Clearly, many have been killed. And then we've got the dilemma that Israel has got, is that rightly it wants to eliminate Hamas as a military threat. But at the same time, we've got to find a way to, at the very least, to look after the Palestinian civilians who are left. It is a responsibility, if you become the occupying power, to look after them. And at the end of this operation, Israel may well have effectively occupied most of Gaza. It then has got to look after that population. And longer term still, we've got to find a way where the Palestinian people can live in peace and justice alongside the Israeli neighbours. So this is a very complicated and very, very difficult situation we're all in.
The images we're seeing now are live from the Rafah crossing there. This is the point, the road to freedom, as it were, for those hostages. This will be a very delicate moment, one assumes. Even the exchanging, the passing over from one group to another, I would imagine, is, you know, full of potential hurdles as well, Simon. This is, until it's happened, then I don't imagine anybody sits down and breathes a sigh of relief until that moment.
No, absolutely. As someone said very properly earlier on, you know, it's not over until it's over. And as you say, this is a very delicate moment, making sure the individuals are people we said that they're going to be, and all those sort of areas need to be checked. So, yes, I can imagine it's a very delicate and very sensitive operation at the moment.
And, of course, I mentioned at the beginning, you know, it's day one of 4 days. We hope this continues and the correct amount of hostages are released and everybody keeps their word. But, of course, the elephant in the room is what happens on day 5.
No, absolutely. And I think nobody, I think, without any imagination could recognise how awful this was, and therefore how difficult it is even to have a conversation with people who perpetrated what happened on October the 7th. But there is somewhere out there a bigger and better and longer term prize, even if it's just a short term one at the moment, of bringing home all the other civilians, women, children, family members who are not involved in the war, getting them back to their families. And that is going to require a lot of delicacy, a lot of nuance, and really a lot of basically just, you know, holding one's nerve, and also perhaps holding your nose a bit as well, and just say, you know, there's a bigger prize here, however awful it is.
The global ramifications of this are also rather interesting, Simon. We know Qatar were crucial in this. Qatar has more of an allegiance with China than it does with the United States. What do we make of that? Are China now the world's new policeman? It was once the United States, of course.
I think it's a bit more neutral than that. I mean, Qatar also hosts the largest US Air Force base outside the United States, Al Udeid Air Force Base, and have done for a number of years. I think the Qataris look at themselves and go, well, what neighbourhood do we live in? I mean, their main income comes through the export of gas, and they need to get that gas out through the Straits of Hormuz, dominated by Iran. The Iranian coast is only some 250 kilometres away from them. They also are a very kind of Western-orientated government. It's a very open government in many respects, but they've got to look at where they are. They live in a difficult neighbourhood, and like in many countries like that in the past, they picked a position of neutrality, and that can be uncomfortable when we have a particular view, a very partial view, and say, well, they should really be on our side. But they'll say, actually, we need to be on our own side. And so I think they try to steer a very, very complex middle way. But that middle way has allowed conversations to take place, which have come to a good place. And the history of neutral states, even through things like the Second World War, is fascinating because the way in which they try and steer their way through what were warring factions all the way around. And that's what the Qatar is doing at the moment.
We appreciate your time, Colonel Simon Diggins. Thank you for joining us on Talk TV.